And it is now recording. Expanding brackets, exercise 5G. Now, what we're going to be learning the first term, AJ, you're going to face your body towards the board, have your exercise books open. We're on exercise 5G, expanding brackets. The first term that you're going to be learning is called the distributive law. So you'll see that. You'll see it over the years. They'll refer it to as the distributive law. Most of you may call it the banana method, or you might call it the expanding method. You may not have a name for it, but it's actually called distributive law. Now, I want you to copy down this rule over here for me. So right there, I want you to write distributive law. So distributive law, and you should have A bracket B plus C is equal to A times the B plus A times the C. Okay, that's called the distributive law. I'm going to draw the arrows to remind you what they've done there too. So it's A times the B and A times the C. Most students will remember the first one, A times B. Most students forget to multiply the second term. Okay? So this is a rule that you'll find that most year 9s and year 10s, they get really good at this rule. They get really proficient with expanding these brackets here. Eventually you learn how to expand double brackets, but at the moment, just doing this itself is called a distributive law, and most students will learn it pretty quickly and know how to do it. But then there are errors in this, and that's what I'm going to try to address today. Okay? Address today. Here we go. So as you copy it down, you got distributive law, you got the rule A times B, and then A times C. Now, as you know, when I teach mathematics, I like to explain where they come from so that you don't need to memorize it. And it also means you can derive the rule any other time. It also means you can apply this as well. You can apply this concept. And I'll show you how to apply this concept, where the logic comes from. Okay? Let's start with something simple. Thank you. You're either actively listening
or note taking.
Thank you. Thank you. So, let's look at some examples. Before we get to that rule and understand how this actually works and why it works, let's think of something we already know. When I say, what is 3 groups of 2? We know the answer is 6. But what does that actually mean? What is it asking? 3 times 2, which means what? 3 groups of 2. So if you were to write it down, this is 1 group of 2 plus 1 group of 2 plus 1 group of 2. That's 3 groups of 2 right there. Right? So in primary school, you may not have started with numbers, but you might have started off with something like this. And they say circle 3 groups of 2. So you would have done 1, 2, 3. Right? Now, we're moving away from the diagrams. We're staying with, okay, 2 plus 2 plus 2. That means 3 groups of 2. We then moved into year 7 and you were introduced to variables and pronumerals. And then this year I tried to reiterate that same skill again. And I said, well, what is then 3 times A mean then?
A plus A.
Very good. 3 groups of A. So this is 1 group of A. This is 2 groups of A. This is 3 groups of A. So you've moved essentially primary school, year 7 concept. But really, there isn't much difference, right? If you can understand that in primary school, technically I can teach you that in primary school as well. Now you move into year 8, and we're using exactly the same concept. And I want you to see something here, okay? What if I gave you this now? 3 times A plus 2. So have a think about the meaning. So I'm all about the meaning, okay? What is, you knew what 3 times 2 was, which was 3 groups of 2. 2 plus 2 plus 2. You knew what 3 times A was, because that means 3 groups of A. A plus A plus A. Then what is 3 times A plus 2? What would that mean?
It would be A plus A plus A plus 2 plus 2 plus 2.
You're a legend. Exactly that. Now we write that down again. I'm going to write exactly what Ryder was saying, but he even organized that information right here. Let's think about what it means. This is 3 groups of whatever A is. this means 3 groups of whatever a plus 2 is. So a plus 2, this is one group. That's one group, so I'm going to write it here. That's one group. Then add a plus 2. Can you see that's now 2 groups? And then you do, yes, exactly, plus another a plus 2. This is 3 groups. Now you're wondering, this was different to what Ryder said, but Ryder did even another step here. He organized that. What did he do? He said a plus a plus a, which I'm going to write down here what he said, okay? So a plus a plus a, and then he said it is 2, so 2 plus 2 plus 2. So what you can see, what he was seeing is that there are 3 of these A's and then 3 of these 2's that you're adding. But what's beautiful is we just said before that a plus a plus a is the same as writing what? What's a plus a plus a the same thing as writing? 3 times a. Very good. This actually just means 3 groups of a. And then, listening, eyes and ears towards me, looking at the board, note taking. So remember, actively listening or actively note taking. Actively listening, Cooper. Active listening or active writing. Okay? Those are the 2. So what I was trying to say here, what Ryder mentioned, a plus a plus a is the same thing as saying 3 groups of a. And then 2 plus 2 plus 2, we already know that's the same thing as 3 groups of 2. Now what you can see there, this is where the rule comes from. When they say 3 bracket a plus 2, you don't need to memorize this, because it literally was 3 groups of this. But since you got 2 terms here, you're going to end up with 3 groups of a and 3 groups of 2. That's what they're doing there. This is why the distributive law says, listening, 3 times the a, 3 times the 2. But this means you don't have to follow this concept, because this is what I get in my year 11 class. If they know how to do that, this is all I do. I change one thing and they don't know how to do it, because you just do it because you memorize it. But if I change it now, I want you to think for a moment. What would the answer be if I changed it to this now? What would this be?
3 a plus a plus a plus b plus b plus a plus c plus a plus b.
Very good, Michael. So, if you simplified that, what would the answer have to be?
It has to be 3 groups of a plus b plus c.
Very good. So it has to be 3 groups of the A's, plus 3 groups of the B's, plus 3 groups of the C's, plus 3 groups of the D's. Listening? Shh. Thank you. Let's settle down. Have we settled? Shh. Thank you. So again, actively listening or actively note-taking. Yeah? So when I'm doing these explanations, I'm expecting that you're writing or you're listening. So, what you can see over here is that you can actually do 3 groups of A, 3 groups of B, 3 groups of C, 3 groups of D. That's your 3A plus 3B plus 3C plus 3D. But that rule, you won't see. That example is not in your textbook. But what I'm trying to teach you is to understand the meaning. Because if you understand the meaning, then you don't have to follow and memorize the distributive law. Okay? Because when you memorize, at some point, you will forget or not understand how it gets applied. Now let's take this to another level. Okay, so you now understand 3 groups of 2, 3 groups of A, 3 groups of A plus 2. But then how does this get applied? You see, sometimes when I'm doing a bit of a number crunching when I'm out shopping, I may do something like this. Let's say I do 3 times 48. Yeah? This is the same concept. You can think of it as 48 plus 48 plus 48, or you can actually break this up. Let's have a look. This is the same thing as writing 3 times. Now, you don't have to do 48 because 48 is too big, right? You can do 40 and 8. You can split it up into 40 plus 8. Can you see how this looks very similar to the algebra that you're working with? You're doing 3 times A plus B. The A is my 40 and my B is my 8. So another way of solving this is, since you know the rule is 3 times A and 3 groups of B, you can think of it as 3 groups of 40, which I know. 3 times 40, what's that?
120.
120. So I already know in my head, it's like, all right, 120, and then 3 groups of 8. What's 3 groups of 8? 24. So 120 plus 24, what does that give you?
144.
Very good. So in my mind, you can do 48 times 3 and do the traditional method, or you can do 48 plus 48 plus 48, or you could have done it this way, using distributive law. You can split it up, because theoretically, that's what that's trying to tell you. That's trying to say 2 numbers that are multiplied to each other, something times something, but if you can split that into 2 terms, technically, it's A groups of that term and A groups of that term. That's what it's trying to teach. So I've taken you from listening. Boys, thank you. I'm finding it very disrespectful at this point. Yeah? Because that's about my 4th or 5th time this session that I had to stop and say, actively listening, actively note-taking. So I think I've been pretty clear of what I'm said. Yeah? But the question is, what does that mean to you? When you're sitting in my class and I'm explaining, what are you doing that signifies that you understand my concept? Yeah? Because when you understand that and you chose not to do that, what does that mean? It means you're being disrespectful to me. You didn't have to be in this class, but you chosen to come and you're here. I'm here to teach you. I'm here to educate you. But by you showing me that kind of respect, that's a backhand slap across my face. Yeah? So I expect that even if you're not there, at least copy the notes so that you can refer to. But I don't expect you to be chitty-chatting on the side, even though it's quite chatting. Yeah? You normally get your time. Normally, once I finish explaining, I give you your time. Yeah? So I try to be as fair, but I need you to also reciprocate that. Cool? Thank you. So, we just went through the levels. We went from primary school mathematics in terms of what 3 groups of 2 meant, but I went from that to something a bit more theoretical, and I've taken you all the way to a journey of really how do you apply that. Now that's a very different level there. What we expect you to do at this stage is that you're going to get used to working with this component. You're going to be working with this section here. That's what you're focused on. Okay, so it's a fluency skill. But to apply it, to understand it, that's what I want you to see. Okay, so when we do some examples, let's have a look at some examples over here. Let's have a look. First example, we're going to do this one together. And then I'm going to give you some time after doing some examples. I'll show you some of the misconceptions that students tend to make a mistake. So copy this down. You've got example 12a. You've got 3 times 2x plus 5. Now we know that through distributive law, we can expand this. And when you expand it, it means you remove the brackets. When you expand it, what are you going to do? How do you expand this bracket? This means 3 groups of 2x plus 5, but we know there's a shortcut to doing this. Times it. What am I timesing right now?
2 times.
Good. So here I'm going to be writing 3 times the 2x, which is what you were saying there. So 3 times the 2x, and this is going back to exercise multiplication, so 4D, plus, and this is what most students forget, they don't do the 3 groups of 5. Now 3 groups of 5, what's 3 groups of 5? 15. So when you write it down, you make sure that you multiply. This is 3 times 5, which is 15. Plus, now what's 3 times 2x? 6x. Very good. So you got 6 groups of x. Now, this is where the mistake is. No, you can't write 21x. Why? This is wrong. Why can't you do that? This is now going back to 5c. Why can't I just say 6x plus 15 is 21x? Why can't I? Because they're different terms. This is a group of x. I've got 6 of these x's, and here it says 15. I don't have 15 x's. Okay, if it said 15x and 6x, then your answer would be 21x. Jake, can we not do that just in case it drops down? And it could be dangerous. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to ask Jeff to slide it down. Is that okay, Jake? And preferably if you remove your hand too. Thank you. We can be better. Thank you. Now, remember, you can't add terms that are not the same. So if this was a 15x and a 6x, yes, you can, because they're the same groups. But right now, they're not the same group, okay?